James Caldwell stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, determination mixing with apprehension. Gone was the pristine look he donned as the successful owner of Prime Tech Electronics. Today he was just another face in the crowd, wrapped in a worn delivery uniform that bore the scars of daily grind. The tailored suits that usually framed his tall stature felt like a distant memory, replaced by the scuffed boots and faded baseball cap. He had built Prime Tech from the ground up, nurturing it through the sweat of his brow and the grit of his determination. But now, staring at the mirror, he felt the weight of countless sleepless nights pressing down on him. Financial reports were like an unwelcome chorus in his mind, the numbers spiraling downward, a symphony of loss echoed by the resignation letters piling high on his desk. Inventory losses were not just accidents. They were whispers of something sinister lurking within his flagship store's walls. With a deep breath, he turned and walked out of his house, determination igniting a fire in his chest. As he arrived at the warehouse, he slipped in through the side door, blending seamlessly with a group of new hires gathered near the entrance. Their anxious expressions mirrored the doubts churning inside him. He clutched fabricated employment papers like armor, but the reality was far more foreboding. At 6 a.m., the creaking warehouse doors opened, welcoming the workers into a world that felt increasingly unwelcoming. The air was electric with unspoken fears as James joined the huddle, hiding in plain sight. Amidst the morning chaos, Derek Shaw, the store manager, strode in like an emperor surveying his kingdom. His charisma was hard to miss, but there was an undertone of superiority in his voice that made James's skin crawl. "Remember, efficiency is everything," Derek drawled, his eyes scanning the group as if they were merely pawns in a game of chess. With every word that fell from his lips, James's apprehension deepened. The tension in the air was palpable. Even the notion of camaraderie felt like a ruse. For a moment, James wondered if this was really the family atmosphere he had cultivated when he first opened the doors of Prime Tech. As the shift began, James noticed the small things. The way employees fell silent when Derek passed, their unease echoing in the glances exchanged between them. There was an atmosphere of watchfulness, a collective anxiety that settled like a cold fog over the warehouse. Something was off and James was determined to find out why. During his lunch break, he observed from a distance. Huddled on the far side of the break room, he caught snippets of conversations amongst his co-workers. Whispers about terminated employees slipped into the air like smoke, and when names like Sarah Chin and Marcus Lopez surfaced, alarm bells rang in his head. Each story echoed a fear so deeply instilled that it seemed to paralyze the workforce. No one dared to ask questions. No one risked drawing attention to themselves. "Did you hear about Sarah?" one veteran worker whispered, a hint of anger in his voice. "She was so diligent, always triple-checking every shipment. Now she's out just like Marcus. This place is turning into a nightmare." The pain in the worker's voice mirrored James's own rising anger. He couldn't shake the feeling that fear was being weaponized against them, twisting the very foundation upon which he'd built his company. As he observed the determined movements of his co-workers, he couldn't help but feel like they were trapped in a carefully constructed prison. That afternoon, a new shipment of premium smartphones arrived, a sight that should have been celebratory, but instead set off a wave of tension. Derek appeared, clipboard in hand, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Workers scattered like startled rabbits, dread casting a shadow over them. "Make sure these are processed according to the new protocol," Derek instructed sharply, his words slicing through the silence like a knife. The way he emphasized "new protocol" sent a chill down James's spine, and he sensed that there was more than just logistics at play. The boxes shifted on the loading dock, disappearing into sections of the warehouse that had not been mentioned in orientation. The layout was familiar yet fundamentally altered, and James's curiosity ignited. What lay behind those closed doors? The more he observed, the more convinced he became that something dark was weaving through the fabric of the warehouse. As dusk fell, James made notes on his phone, determined to piece together the puzzle haunting Prime Tech. This was no mere oversight or natural dip in business. It was manipulation, and that realization cut deeper than any lost profit could. The warehouse was no longer just a workspace, it became a theater of fear. The next day brought another wave of tension. The grim specter of termination repeated itself when a young employee, Sarah, was escorted out in tears, her cardboard box of belongings clutched tightly like a shield. Derek watched, feigning concern, but his eyes sparkled with something darker, satisfaction perhaps. "The security footage doesn't lie," he told the onlookers, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Something snapped within James. He watched as the other workers avoided Sarah's gaze, the collective fear stifling their responses. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a pattern emerging more vividly with each passing day. As he tucked away his lunch, James overheard hushed conversations between veteran employees, voices tinged with bitterness. "How can this keep happening?" one murmured. "Every time someone speaks up about discrepancies, they're out the door. It's like they're just waiting for any excuse." "First came the cameras to catch the hives, and now the real criminals are playing games," the other replied, voice low and deep with frustration. James felt the weight of despair settling around them like a heavy fog he couldn't dispel. His heart raced as anger collided with determination. He was going to get to the bottom of this, even if it meant he had to get his hands dirty, risking everything he had built. In the coming days he continued to act the part of the unsuspecting delivery driver. He followed the trail of destruction left in the wake of Derek's management, watching carefully for clues. But the deeper he delved, the more tangled the web became. One afternoon he witnessed Derek's seamless movements as he logged incoming shipments. The door slid open, revealing a batch of high-end electronics ready to be processed. James watched as Derek fired off orders, shuffling workers around like pawns, while the others scurried about, each fulfilling their role in this unsettling play. Every detail painted a picture more sinister than he had imagined, and the atmosphere weighed heavily on his shoulders. It was suffocating. There was a cancer growing in this warehouse, one that could destroy not just the company but the lives of those who worked within it. That evening, James went home consumed by thoughts of what he had witnessed. The events of the day spiraled in his mind, echoes of conversations looping endlessly, visions of terminated employees flashing before him. He realized that he wasn't just fighting for the integrity of Prime Tech, he was fighting for the lives of those who depended on it, every single employee who lived in fear of losing everything. As he lay awake that night, he knew he was on the brink of uncovering something massive, something that would require every ounce of his resolve and cunning. Tomorrow would be another day undercover, another chance to dig deeper. James Caldwell was not just an observer, he was a man on a mission. The battle had begun, and he would not rest until the truth laid bare before him, exposed in its rawest form. The sun crested the horizon, heralding the dawn of another day. As James set out towards the warehouse, he steeled himself. The shadows within Prime Tech were shifting, and he was determined to shine a light on every secret, every betrayal until the rot was cut out once and for all. This was just the beginning. As James Caldwell stepped into the warehouse the next morning, he felt a weight pressing down on him. The shadows of yesterday's events haunted his mind, the hushed conversations, the fear in his co-workers' eyes, and Derek Shaw's quick temper. He was no longer just an observer. He was ready to take action against the mess inside Prime Tech. The morning bustle filled the warehouse, but there was an edge of discomfort in the air. Employees exchanged nervous glances, and conversations hushed whenever Derek came into sight. James noticed the fear in their faces. It was clear that no one wanted to attract Derek's attention. "Hey Derek," James called out, forcing a cheery tone as he approached the manager. He acted as if he was just another eager worker. "I noticed some weird things in the inventory logs. Is that normal?" Derek turned to him, eyebrows raised. "Just a few computer glitches," he said curtly. "Leave the details to management. Keep your focus on your tasks." James nodded, hiding his frustration. Derek's dismissive answer only fueled his determination to find the truth. The atmosphere was filled with unease, and James could sense that something wasn't right. He needed to gather clues. The day progressed, and James tried to connect with the other employees during lunch. He sat with a group of veterans who looked worn down by their jobs. "Has anyone else noticed how strange things have been lately?" James asked, hoping to open a discussion. One of them, a tall man named Frank, nodded gravely. "You're new here so you might not know. But this has been happening for a while. Employees like Marcus keep disappearing, some for just asking too many questions. It's not just about missing inventory, we're living in fear." The weight of Frank's words sank deep into James's heart. He glanced around the break room, realizing how much fear had gripped everyone. It was heartbreaking to see hard-working individuals reduced to shadows, scared of losing their jobs. James was determined to shine a light on the truth. If Derek was making examples out of those who questioned him, he needed to gather their stories. They could unite and fight against the corruption before it swallowed them whole. As he finished his lunch, he made a plan to stay late after work. The security office might hold more secrets than he realized. He had some experience with technology, and perhaps he could find evidence to prove what was going wrong. That evening, James snuck into the security room, his heart racing. The dim screens flickered to life, showing different angles of the warehouse. He began to sift through the footage, looking for anything suspicious. Hours went by as he switched through clips, searching for clues. Finally, he stumbled upon something revealing, a series of dates and events that didn't add up. It looked like some footage had been altered, and the records didn't match what he'd seen with his own eyes. The puzzle pieces began to fit together, and he sensed he was onto something. Just then he heard a door creak open. James quickly turned to see Travis, Derek's assistant, glide into the room with a worried look on his face. James held his breath, staying hidden behind some boxes, knowing this could be important. Travis started typing quickly on the computer. James couldn't believe what he was seeing. Suddenly, Travis pulled up a file labeled discrepancies. He began editing video clips, clearly trying to hide evidence of what was happening behind the scenes. Realization hit James like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't simply about theft, it was a full-blown cover-up, aimed at controlling the narrative and keeping employees in line. He felt compelled to record the scene on his phone, knowing that this moment could be crucial. He pressed record, capturing the proof that would help expose Derek and save his co-workers. "Derek won't let us get caught, right?" Travis asked, his voice shaky as he hurriedly continued to adjust the footage. "What if someone sees us?" "Just do as I say, Travis," Derek's voice echoed as if he had entered the room. "You know the consequences. Anyone who raises a question will wish they didn't." James's heart sank, but his resolve grew stronger. This was bigger than he'd realized. Tomorrow he would confront both men with the evidence he had gathered. He had to do it carefully. If he tipped them off, they could destroy everything. As he slipped out of the office and into the darkened warehouse, his mind raced with what he had seen. It would not be easy, but he was determined to protect his co-workers and reclaim the integrity of Prime Tech. The storm was brewing, and it was time for the truth to come to light. The next morning, James woke early, his mind racing with strategies. Today was the day he would confront Derek and Travis. He felt a mix of excitement and anxiety, knowing that exposing the truth could change everything. As he got ready, he kept reminding himself that he was not alone. His co-workers needed someone to stand up for them, and he intended to be that person. As he entered the warehouse, the usual sounds of machines humming and employees chatting filled the air, but an undercurrent of tension still hung around. James took a deep breath and steeled himself for the task ahead. He decided to gather his closest co-workers during the morning break. If he was going to confront Derek, he needed their support. At the designated time, he pulled a few employees aside: Frank, Lisa, and Mark. They were reluctant at first, their expressions wary, but James spoke earnestly. "I've seen things we need to take action on. If we unite, we can confront Derek and make sure our voices are heard." Frank looked skeptical. "James, you don't know what he's capable of. He's dangerous. People have vanished for less." "I know," James said firmly. "But if we do nothing, it will only get worse. We have proof that Derek is manipulating the inventory reports and silencing anyone who questions him. We can't let fear control us any longer." Lisa, who had been quiet until now, nodded slowly. "If we stand together, we might have a chance." Encouraged by their support, James felt a surge of confidence. They agreed to meet in the break room later to prepare for the confrontation. As the morning shifted into afternoon, James couldn't shake the feeling of foreboding. Would Derek retaliate? Would they even be able to face him together? When the lunch break came, they gathered in the break room, whispering about their plan. James shared his recorded evidence and the sections where Travis altered footage. The group watched in a mix of disbelief and anger. "This can't go on," Mark insisted. "We need to show the higher-ups what Derek is doing. This isn't just factory work, it's people's lives." "Agreed," Frank added, his resolve strengthening. "We're all in this together now. Let's show Derek we won't be intimidated anymore." With their spirits high and a plan forming, James led them out of the break room. They walked toward Derek's office, making sure to keep their composure. Each step felt heavy, as if the weight of their collective fears pressed down on them. When they reached the office, they found Derek sitting behind his desk, a smug smile on his face. Well, what do we have here?" he sneered, looking at the group assembled before him. "Planning a little rebellion? How cute." James took a deep breath. "Derek, we need to talk. We know what you're doing with the inventory reports and the layoffs. This ends today." Derek's smile faded, replaced by a cold glare. "You think you can just waltz in here and demand change? You're in way over your heads. Trust me, you don't want to make me an enemy." But James stood firm. "We're not afraid of you anymore. We've seen what you've done to employees who questioned you. We have proof and we're not backing down." A tense silence fell over the room, the air thick with threat. James could see Derek's mind racing, calculating his next move. "You're making a mistake, Caldwell," Derek said, his voice low and menacing. At that moment, Travis entered the room looking visibly shaken. His eyes darted between James and Derek. I didn't know you were all here," he stammered. "Travis," James said, feeling a surge of hope. "You can help us. You know what Derek's doing. It's time to tell the truth." Travis hesitated, glancing at Derek. I don't want to lose my job." "You might lose it anyway if you continue to follow him blindly," Frank urged with conviction. "Together we can expose what's hidden. Think of everyone here who has suffered." Derek slammed his palm on the table, causing them all to jump. "You think you can take me down? You're just a bunch of scared workers. You would be nothing without my leadership." James shook his head. "No, Derek. We were strong before you came, and we will be stronger after you're gone." Derek's face twisted with rage, and for a moment, James feared that he might retaliate. But then Travis stepped forward, urgency in his voice. I can't keep this up. I've been part of this mess for too long. I'll help you find the documents, the recordings, everything. We need to put an end to this." Relief swept through the group as Travis shifted sides. The tide was turning. Derek's expression morphed from confidence to panic as he realized his control was slipping. "You have no idea what you're doing, Travis," Derek seethed. "You'll regret this." "We'll see about that," James said, gathering strength from the support of his friends. "You don't have power over us anymore, not with the truth on our side." With that, they stormed out of the office, determination coursing through them. They had the evidence they needed, and they would gather more support from other employees. They would take their fight to the higher-ups, exposing Derek and his twisted games. As they left the office, James felt a sense of liberation. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but the storm he had long feared had finally begun to break. The truth was on the horizon, and together, they would face whatever came next. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, James and his newfound allies gathered in a quiet corner of the warehouse. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and fear. They all sensed that their confrontation with Derek was only the beginning. "All right, we need to act fast," James said, rallying the group. "We're going to gather more evidence tonight and prepare our case. We'll present everything to the board first thing in the morning. No more hiding." Lisa, full of determination, nodded vigorously. "We can compile a list of all the employees who have been affected. If we all stand together, they can't ignore us." As they began strategizing, Travis returned, looking somewhat nervous but ready to help. "I managed to find some files in the security office," he said, handing James a USB drive. "There are recordings of meetings where Derek discusses the layoffs and the manipulation of inventory. This could be the nail in his coffin." James took the USB, his heart racing. "This is fantastic, Travis. With this and our witness accounts, we'll have undeniable evidence." With their plan in place, they broke off into smaller groups, each focusing on gathering more testimonies and organizing what they already had. Frank spoke to some of the older employees, while Lisa and Mark approached those who had expressed concerns in the past. Meanwhile, James sat with Travis, reviewing the contents of the USB drive on his laptop. Each video clip showcased Derek's arrogance and disregard for the truth. As the footage rolled, James could feel the anger building inside him. He knew this was not just about them, it was about reclaiming their dignity and the integrity of their workplace. Hours passed, and soon the warehouse grew quiet as the night deepened. The atmosphere was tense, but there was also an undeniable sense of camaraderie. They had become a team united against a common foe. As dawn broke, James and his friends congregated one last time under the bright fluorescent lights of the break room. They shared their findings and stories. It was a bittersweet moment. Everyone felt the weight of what they were about to do, but they also felt empowered. "Today we take back our control," James said, his voice steady. As they approached the corporate office, butterflies fluttered in James's stomach. He wondered how the board members would react. Would they believe them? Would they stand up against Derek? They needed a united front to make their voices heard. When they entered the conference room, the board members were already seated, looking perplexed. James stepped forward, flanked by his colleagues, feeling the strength of their presence. "Thank you for meeting with us," James started confidently. "We've come to discuss serious issues regarding management practices at Prime Tech, particularly concerning Derek Shaw." Derek, who had been lurking by the door, his eyes narrowing in disbelief, was quick to interject. "This is nonsense. These are just disgruntled employees looking for attention. They don't know what they're talking about." But James pressed on unfazed. We have evidence that shows manipulation of inventory reports and retaliation against those who speak up. This isn't just a few missing items. This is about honesty and safety in our workplace. We deserve to be heard. He glanced around the room, noting the board members exchanging looks of concern. They were listening. Taking a deep breath, he continued, "These recordings prove that Derek has been misleading both workers and management. We have witness testimonies, and Travis here is ready to share everything he knows." Travis stepped forward, visibly shaken but determined. He spoke honestly about the fear he had faced and how he realized that standing by Derek was wrong. The room fell silent as he detailed everything he witnessed and how he had gathered evidence firsthand. As each member of the group shared their stories, James could see the tide turning. The board listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to concern. Derek shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing how isolated he had become. "The integrity of this company rests on trust and transparency," Lisa concluded passionately. "We need to create an environment where everyone feels safe to speak up without fear of retaliation. If we want Prime Tech to thrive, we need to change how things are done." The head of the board, a stern woman named Ms. Harrison, finally spoke. "Thank you all for your courage in coming forward. We take these allegations very seriously. It's clear we need to conduct a thorough investigation." As the meeting concluded, a feeling of triumph washed over James and his friends. They had done it. They had taken the first step to reclaim their voices and the company they cared about. Derek stormed out, his face flushed with rage, but it hardly mattered now. He no longer held the same power over them. They had banded together to expose him and to protect each other. In the coming weeks, with the board's investigation underway, the atmosphere at Prime Tech began to shift. Transparency became a priority, and employees felt empowered to share their ideas again. Meetings were held to discuss company values, and for the first time, everyone felt they mattered. James stood in the warehouse one evening looking at his friends. They had made a difference, proving that courage could indeed overcome fear. As the sun set once more, he felt hope bloom within him. Together they had faced the storm, and at last they were free to embrace a better future. This time they were ready to rise, rebuild, and reclaim their workplace, ensuring that it would flourish not just as a company but as a community where everyone's voice was valued.